The Taklamakan Desert has a name that translates, depending on who you ask, as either you go in and you don't come out, or place of no return. Both translations are accurate. It is the second largest shifting sand desert on Earth, covering 337,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Germany, in the heart of Central Asia. Its dunes reach the height of 12-story buildings and move with the wind, burying roads, swallowing farmland, and consuming entire villages on its edges. 1 out of every 3 days here is a sandstorm day. The dust that rises off its surface doesn't stay local. It travels 2,000 kilometers east to Beijing, and some of it crosses the Pacific Ocean and falls on rooftops in California. For thousands of years, Silk Road traders carrying silk, gold, and spices across Asia did not cross this desert. They walked around it, adding weeks to their journey rather than attempt what was inside. And in April 2024, engineers from China's Xinjiang region released 100,000 live ocean fish into tanks they had built in the middle of it. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what they did, why almost every scientist who heard about it expected it to fail, what the numbers showed 12 months later, and what the second part of this story, the one happening at the desert's edges, means for every arid region on the planet. And if this is the kind of story you came here for, the engineering experiments that quietly rewrite what we thought was physically possible, subscribe to Iron Circuit right now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Let's get into it. Before you can understand what China built inside the Taklamakan, you need to understand the problem it was trying to solve. China has a water distribution problem on a scale that is difficult to fully picture. The south of the country is wet. Rivers, rainfall, agriculture that works. The north and northwest are dry. Factories, cities, population centers, all dependent on water that is increasingly difficult to find. The Xinjiang region, home to the Taklamakan, receives less than 100 millimeters of rain per year in most areas. Some corners of the desert go multiple years without a drop hitting the ground. For decades, the answer was to pump groundwater, drill wells, pull water up from underground aquifers, use it for agriculture, industry, and drinking. That approach worked until it didn't. Groundwater levels began dropping. Rivers that fed from underground sources began drying up. Land began to sink as the water beneath it was removed. The conventional solution, take water from underground, was making the problem worse faster than it was solving anything. And this is where the story takes a turn that nobody in the engineering community saw coming. Because beneath the Taklamakan Desert, alongside all that depleted freshwater, sits something else entirely. Vast underground pockets of brackish water, salty, alkaline water that has been sitting beneath the sand for thousands of years. Water so salty it cannot be used for agriculture. So alkaline it cannot be used for drinking. So chemically hostile that for most of history, nobody seriously considered it anything other than a geological nuisance. The conventional engineering response to brackish underground water is to either ignore it or try to treat it into something usable, a process that requires energy and expensive equipment. A farm manager named Gong Yonghong looked at this water and asked a completely different question. What if you stopped trying to fix the water? What if instead you found something that was already designed to live in it? The answer Gong landed on was not what any reasonable person would have predicted. Ocean fish. Marine species, grouper, mullet, silver siligo, pearl oysters, bred and adapted over millions of years to thrive in salty, mineral-rich water. The same kind of water sitting underneath one of the most inhospitable deserts on the planet. The technical gap between salty desert groundwater and seawater capable of supporting marine life is real and significant. Gong and his team bridged it with 3 specific interventions. First, they combined the desert's brackish groundwater with snowmelt coming down from the Tian Shan Mountains to the north, mountain snow dissolving each summer and flowing through underground channels into the desert basin. The mixture gave them a base that was closer in mineral profile to coastal seawater than either source alone. Second, they introduced cultivated microorganisms, specific bacteria and algae, that accelerated the conversion of the mixed water into a stable, biologically active environment. These microorganisms are the same biological tools used in advanced aquaculture facilities worldwide. What made the Xinjiang application unusual was the source water they were being asked to work with. Third, and most critically, they built closed-loop tank systems that gave them total control over what happened to the water once it was inside. These are not ordinary ponds dug into desert sand. Each tank is a sealed biological environment. Thick, impermeable membranes line every surface, preventing the engineered water from ever contacting the surrounding soil. Pumps run continuously, circulating water through biological and mechanical filtration before returning it to the tanks. Oxygen is forced through the water around the clock. Temperature control systems maintain water between 24 and 30 degrees Celsius, regardless of what the air above is doing, whether that is 42 degrees at midday or below zero before dawn. Water chemistry sensors sample salinity, oxygen, and pH every few minutes and trigger automatic adjustments when any reading drifts outside the target range. The result is an environment more stable and more precisely controlled than any open ocean or coastal aquaculture operation can achieve. Which brings us to the number that made researchers reading the initial reports pause and ask for the underlying data. In commercial open water fish farming, survival rates typically run between 60 and 80%. This is considered normal. Disease spreads through open water. Predators find their way into net pens. Temperature spikes stress and kill vulnerable juveniles. Parasites travel in on ocean currents. You plan for loss because loss is built into the biology of raising fish in an environment you cannot fully control. The survival rate in Xinjiang's Taklamakan Desert tanks, sustained across the full production cycle, was above 99%. The closed environment had eliminated almost every variable that kills fish in conventional operations. No wild predators could reach a sealed tank. No ocean-borne disease could enter from outside. Temperature never shifted unexpectedly. Water chemistry never changed with the weather. The fish grew to market size faster than they would have in coastal operations. And almost none of them died. Word spread through farming communities in Xinjiang's desert counties. One farm became 6 cooperatives. Processing buildings appeared alongside tank rows in the sand. Refrigerated trucks began loading up at facilities built in landscapes that had never produced food. The scale of what followed is what moved this story from an interesting experiment to something that economists and food security researchers are now taking seriously. Xinjiang produced 184,000 tons of seafood in 2023, generating revenue of over $530 million. In 2024, production climbed to 196,500 tons, a 6.8% increase year over year. Pacific white shrimp, Australian lobster, grouper packed in ice. Pearl oysters produce actual pearls. All of it is leaving the Taklamakan Desert in refrigerated trucks, arriving in markets in Shanghai, Beijing, and Chengdu, and crossing international borders to Singapore. Premium seafood, farmed in a place ancient traders refused to cross, is now being exported to coastal cities with direct access to actual oceans. That is the inside of the desert. But the outside of the Taklamakan is where the second story lives, and it is bigger. In 1978, the Chinese government began a project at the desert's rim. Workers planted trees. Not a symbolic gesture. A systematic engineered campaign to build a living wall around the perimeter of one of the world's largest and most hostile deserts. Desert poplar, saxaul, red willow, species chosen specifically because they survive on almost no water, their roots drilling deep through dry soil searching for underground moisture, their leaves small enough to lose almost nothing to evaporation. Drip irrigation pipes buried alongside every row, delivering water precisely to root zones and nowhere else. For 46 years, this continued without interruption. Through political upheaval, economic crises, and severe droughts, 600,000 workers participated in the final phase alone. On November 28, 2024, last year, a worker in Yutian County on the desert's southern edge planted the last sapling in the last gap. A rose bush pressed into the sand closed a 285-kilometer stretch that had remained unfinished because it was the hardest section of the entire project. Fastest moving dunes, lowest groundwater, strongest winds. That single planting completed a green belt of 3,046 kilometers. A continuous living perimeter surrounds the entire Taklamakan Desert, roughly 3 times the straight-line distance from Beijing to Shanghai. The longest ecological barrier around any desert anywhere on Earth. built over 46 years, one tree at a time. And what it has started doing since completion is the part scientists are most interested in. Forest coverage in Xinjiang has risen from 1% of the region's land area to 5% over the last 4 decades. Man-made oases grew from 59,600 square kilometers in 1990 to 1,450 square kilometers by 2024. Sandstorm frequency hitting Beijing has measurably decreased. In 2019, for the first time in Xinjiang's recorded modern history, the area of desertified land in the region actually shrank. The desert got smaller. And measurements taken along the Green Belt in 2025 found something researchers had hoped for but were not certain would materialize at this scale. During the wet season, the planted vegetation is absorbing more carbon dioxide than it releases. A desert that spent decades expanding is now functioning at its edges as a carbon sink. Here's my honest read on what the numbers mean, because this is the part that requires precision. The aquaculture production figures, 196,500 tons in 2024, are documented by regional authorities and have been cross-referenced by international reporting. This is a real functioning industry at industrial scale. The 99% survival rate is a figure reported by individual farm operators. It has not yet been confirmed through independent, peer-reviewed scientific studies, and extraordinary early-stage results from new operations should be tracked over time rather than treated as settled benchmarks. That said, high survival rates in closed recirculating tank systems are not surprising. This technology is used commercially across the world, and the controlled environment advantages are real and well understood. The Greenbelt completion in November 2024 is fully verified by satellite imagery and international environmental monitoring. The carbon sink data from 2025 is early and requires longer observation before strong conclusions can be drawn, but every measurement taken so far points in the same direction. Now here is why all of this extends far beyond Xinjiang. 1/3 of the Earth's land surface is arid or semi-arid. Deserts are expanding on every continent. Water scarcity threatens 3.2 billion people worldwide, and that number is projected to grow. The conventional answer to desert food insecurity has always been build infrastructure where water already exists and move production and population away from arid land. What the Taklamakan experiment proposes is that this framing is wrong. The same closed-tank aquaculture technology works wherever saline underground water exists, and brackish underground water is one of the most common geological features in arid and semi-arid regions worldwide. The same drought-resistant tree species used in Xinjiang's Greenbelt have already been studied for application in the Sahara, in the Gobi, and along the expanding edges of Central Asian deserts. Agricultural planners in Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, and parts of Australia and Northern Africa are watching what happened in Xinjiang with serious interest. What China built in the Taklamakan is not just a solution to a regional problem. It is a documented template, a proof of concept that you can produce food inside a desert, stabilize a desert's edges with living infrastructure, and eventually reverse the direction of change on a landscape that everyone had written off. The hardest part of any template is the first proof that it works. That proof now exists. So here's the question I want you to sit with after watching this. For generations, deserts have been treated as permanent limitations, land that cannot feed people and cannot be reclaimed. The Taklamakan is now producing nearly 200,000 tons of seafood per year from land that gets almost no rain. Its edges are measurably getting greener. If this is technically possible here, in one of the harshest and most hostile environments on the planet, what is actually stopping the rest of the world's desert regions from doing the same thing? Is the barrier engineering, money, political will, or is it simply that for too long nobody was paying close enough attention to what was being built here? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and on a topic like this, I want to know where you actually land. If you want to keep following stories like this one, the engineering experiments and large-scale projects that quietly change what we thought was possible before the mainstream catches up, subscribe to Iron Circuit and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.